Overlambulance.
Yeah, buddy.
What's up, everybody? Back in the Overlambulance doing some work in here with my buddy Jimmy. Say hi, Jaime. So,
did you pick a colder day to do this?
I know, right? He just made me wipe the sleep out of my, like, oh, you got eye boogers. I'm gonna let him know it's cold. But so, here we are. Ambulance is all gutted. And Jim and I were just talking about, you know, people who do ambulance builds and stuff are usually really intimidated by the wiring. And what were you saying, Jimmy? Like, get it all torn apart?
Well, I think a lot of it is obviously hidden behind all the panels. And once you expose the panels, you'll see that it's very kind of systematically done. And you're able to start kind of figuring out, okay, what goes to where. And it's a lot simpler when you see it out here versus when you see it inside the box.
Because this is what it looks like inside the control panel, and this is what really gets people, including me. I mean, I looked at that and just slammed it shut at first. I was like, I'm scared. But so the goal for us is we're gonna do some wire rundowns. We're gonna see maybe about how to keep certain things running and eliminate others. But one thing that should help us, and we're really hoping, is that you can contact the manufacturer of each box and talk to them and see if you can get some schematics. Like, fortunately, I contacted Braun yesterday, and within like 20 minutes they had a book of the layout, because they did the remount on this, because this one is like from the mid-90s, I believe, is when this box was built. So that did pose a little bit of a problem, just due to the fact that he said their computer system had changed 3 times since then. But he was able to get me the info. So anything else you think we should mention, Jimmy, other than getting the schematics and not being intimidated? Like, it does make sense when you look at it now. It's very organized, and I don't know that they're all going to be like that. Maybe some fleets are better than others, and builders are different.
It's definitely there are some ambulance manufacturers that do a better job than others. There is a certain amount of standard that has to be held for, you know, building it to almost like how houses have kind of like codes.
Yeah.
These type of things have to meet standards, so you can expect it's similar. There may be some areas that it didn't quite do as clean, depending on the manufacturer.
And how old and how much has been changed in the department for their specific
that is
needs.
Probably my biggest recommendation if you're buying an ambo, is try to get one that hasn't already been somebody else's project, meaning they didn't start ripping out the wiring and give up halfway through, because that could be a little bit more challenging than starting with a fresh box. You know, buying an ambulance that came directly out of service like this one did, the only thing they removed is what to keep it legal to be able to be removed from service, but otherwise everything else is intact. Because I have seen some ambulances where people will start and then they get overwhelmed and sell, and then you're picking up somebody else's project that didn't get done. And
that's a bunch of headaches and problems, usually, is what I've come to understand. So, well, with all that being said, we're going to get started on this, and hopefully just do a little time lapse for you guys, and hope you guys dig it. So let's get to it. All right, guys, we chased down some batteries, cables and stuff, and I want to show you what we found so far. So inside here, instead of running the batteries connections here together and having short wires, they ran it into here, and then as you can see on the wall there, on the firewall in there, not the firewall, but I guess that'd be the firewall, you can see that they, what is that, kind of just a splicer?
It's like a junction box.
A junction box. They just use that on the wall there. So, you know, normally they do connect the 2 batteries, the grounds together and the positive together, and then they run it off, but this one is a little different. And then they go back, and some connect back here behind the driver's seat, you can see down there, and some go up to the panel where all the electrical's at. What is that called? Just the electrical housing or whatever?
So you could call that the electrical doghouse?
Yeah. Up into here, it comes into this solenoid right there from that box.
And the purpose of that solenoid is to combine the batteries on starting, but also to, I think, isolate it so that when the box is on, it's not, well, no, because this is designed to run all the time. So it's just a place for it to combine and then distribute power. So we figured out the chassis. There's a junction underneath the ambulance that actually the power goes to the engine. So trying to isolate what keeps the ambulance running and what powers back here. So now that we figured out what powers the ambulance, then we, in theory, you could literally cut everything out of here because you now have isolated the engine. So this thing will still drive.
And then we can just build a completely separate solar system if we want to do that to run the box. But we kind of want it to charge the solar batteries also. So we got to figure that out. And then this solenoid up here on the dash, there's a switch that says, what is it called? The module disconnect. So that's probably what that solenoid is. You hit that switch and it lets the power go to this doghouse.
Yeah. So still chasing down wires. First thing is, before you start cutting wires, is identifying what are your main sources of power and where do they go.
And that's about where we're at now. So yeah, coming along though, figuring stuff out. And it's not taking as long as everybody made it sound like it'll take. So we're just scratching the surface, but we'll see. We got more info to share. Pay attention. Or not.
You've got essentially 3 sides coming in. On one side, you have what's constant power. So like if we put the voltmeter on it, and I recommend, this is like a cheap voltmeter. You don't need to get something expensive. This is like an AutoZone special. Find us a ground. So if you see, we have 12 volts coming in. You got 12 volts on this side of the terminal. And what that's telling us is it's a constant power coming in from the battery. And what we already determined is this thick one goes down into the battery. We still haven't determined what this one is or what this one is, but it's a constant power. On this side only gets energized when this gets combined with the switch. Think of it as an on and off. It's a one-way. When you're just sitting here, no power goes to here. Now might be some residual power.
But then when you hit the module disconnect,
it combines.
Turn it on, it releases that solenoid.
Now what you wanted to be able to confirm that that's exactly what you have, you should be able to see this at 12. And when you turn the ignition on, this should energize up to somewhere between 13 and 14 volts. That's what's actually coming through when your vehicle's running. When we combined it, then this thing also shows the same 14 volts. So from here, you can see that this thick wire runs to this board. That is your main power for this entire board. So that's kind of this is your key. If nothing else, this is where all the power kind of distributes from here. Everything else is kind of like branching off. But once you determine what is powering your what do you want to call this?
Just your electrical board.
Your electrical board, and then determining what are constant. Because one of the things we want to make sure we're conscious of is, are any of these powering running lights, brake lights, or any of that? Because it could be bringing a lot of that stuff up in here and removing it from the cab. The other thing we're looking for is, what is powering the AC unit? Because in this particular case, we want to keep the ability to run the AC while the ambulance is idling.
Yep, while we're driving and stuff.
And having an independent AC for when you're boondocking. Actually, that might be a good time to kind of explain. And then, what was the name of the guy's video that we shout out to him, because he probably explained it the quickest?
I don't remember.
I think it's Campulence Man.
Oh, that was one, yeah, Campulence.
So one thing to remember, unlike an RV or whatever, the batteries that are in an ambulance are to run everything. It's not for boondocking. That's the best way he put it.
Ambulances are built to idle on scene and run the entire time, not to shut down. So both the batteries that are in there are to sustain the startup and the accessories in the back. And you have 2 alternators to keep those 2 batteries charged. As soon as you shut them down and turn on stuff in the back, it's going to kill them. You're going to die soon.
Quick. So that if you kind of wrap your mind around that there's a separate
ambulance, you're going to die quick.
Don't fool. being able to kind of wrap your mind around that and not trying to figure out when do you power the box and when do you power that kind of helps you isolate the two in your mind.
So basically what we're trying to do now is just figure out what we want to keep to transfer over to solar power so that we can run, you know, and make sure there's nothing critical, like we're going to tear this out and then the ambulance isn't going to start. You know what I mean? That's the biggest thing. So.
Which we've already identified the chassis wires that run the engine.
Yep.
So in theory, we know what 2 wires are running the van portion of the build. So you could disconnect those and you could literally run those to a whole separate battery.
Yep.
And then your engine starting has nothing to do with back here.
Yep. So that's what we found so far. We'll keep you guys informed. Hope it's helping. Thank you, Jimmy. I actually reused this wire for my little cat eye for an entry type light. Here we are running new wire for where the refrigerator is going to sit at the bottom so that I can power that. Luckily we had access to pretty much every possible location. And then I just wander up and put this window in. So for some reason my ADHD kicks in and I'm watching this and in my head I hear the conversation going something like but I don't really know what that means. I'm about to take down this structure in the back and that's where all the cabinets were, the big ones, and I took them all out because it was in the way of where I'm going to put my bed. There was actually quite a bit more aluminum shavings than I thought by using the cutting wheel here, but it was actually a lot of work to get this out of here with all the welds and the tack welds and both sides and getting the grinder in there or the cutting wheel in there and doing it. But after we got it out here in a second, it looked pretty good. After I ground this down, it was time to just get cleaned up and call it a day. Hope you guys are enjoying the build series. I'm doing my best to show you what I did.
You broke my mask.
Hey, it's a generic. It's a